Ned Stark never wanted to be king. He'd said it many times, to many people, most often to his wife, Catelyn, who would listen with that patient expression that only half believed him. But in this story, Robert Baratheon never returned from his last hunt. Instead of a dying king scrawling out a name for his successor, Westeros was thrown into chaos when the king's bloated body was dragged back to the Red Keep, stinking of wine, boar's blood, and regret. With no heir fit to rule, Joffrey still a boy, and rumours already swirling of his true parentage, the lords of the realm looked to the man they trusted most, Eddard Stark, Warden of the North. Honour-bound, the last good man in a kingdom full of wolves, they pushed him into it. The lords of the Vale whispered it would prevent a war. The houses in the Riverlands, weary of Lannister power, pledged support. Even Renly Baratheon, young and ambitious, agreed it was better to have Ned as king than see the throne fall to Cersei's son. Varys and Littlefinger stood behind the curtains, nudging things silently, their reasons hidden as always. And so, with great reluctance, Ned Stark accepted the crown. He was crowned in the great sept of Baelor, with none of the joy or pomp that usually followed such a thing. His face was stone. Catelyn stood beside him, strong but unsure. The Stark children, strangers in the capital, watched their father turn into something they never expected. Even Arya had gone quiet. At first, it looked like peace would follow. The Lannisters stayed quiet, licking their wounds, too shocked by Robert's sudden death to act quickly. Tywin returned to Casterly Rock, cold and calculating, while Cersei remained in King's Landing, watching with those lioness eyes. Joffrey spat and stomped and swore, but no one listened, not anymore. Ned tried to rule the way he lived, with honour and truth. But Westeros had no love for truth. The small council, now filled with men who barely tolerated each other, became a place of endless argument. Peter Baelish smiled too much. Varys whispered too softly. Renly wanted change too fast. Stannis, bitter and distant on Dragonstone, sent word he would not bow to a man who wore another's crown. Still, Ned tried. He brought order to the City Watch, removed corrupt gold cloaks, and placed Ser Barristan in charge of the guard. He made peace with the Iron Bank, securing coin to feed the people through winter. He even offered mercy to Cersei, asking her to leave the capital peacefully with her children. She refused, of course. "I will not be chased from my home like a dog," she said, her voice thick with venom. "You are no king to me." But it was the North that first began to stir. Robb, now Lord of Winterfell, struggled with whispers of betrayal. Some northern lords believed Ned had abandoned them, trading the ice and wolves for a throne of lies. They wanted their warden back, not a king locked behind southern walls. The Karstarks, the Umbers, even the Boltons began meeting behind closed doors. Then came the Raven from Dragonstone. Stannis Baratheon declared Ned Stark a usurper, naming himself the rightful king. He claimed that Joffrey was no true Baratheon and called for Ned to surrender. He signed his letter with flames and fury, the symbol of a burning heart scrawled across the parchment. But Ned, always stubborn, always holding to duty, refused to yield. He sent ravens to the north, to the Riverlands, to the Eyrie. "I did not take this crown for power," he wrote. "I took it to keep the realm from bleeding, but I will not let fire consume it now." As the wind grew colder and the shadows in the capital stretched longer, whispers began again. Not of a mad king, not yet, but of a good man who might not survive in a world built on treachery and ambition. And far across the narrow sea, a young girl with silver hair looked to the west and dreamed of fire. In the weeks that followed Ned's refusal to bow to Stannis, the kingdom began to crack like old ice beneath a heavy boot. Ravens flew thick across Westeros, each carrying words sharpened like blades. Stannis called for war, his sigil raised high, red and burning, daring the realm to deny his claim. He marched from Dragonstone with his soldiers of iron discipline, his ships sleek and silent like shadows on the water. Ned knew what was coming. He'd seen war before, the screams, the smell, the lies dressed up as banners. He held council daily now, his face more drawn than ever. Catelyn urged him to strike first, to put Stannis down before he gathered strength, but Ned shook his head. "If we spill blood first, we're the traitors," he said. "Let the realm see who brings war to their door." Still, preparations had to be made. The defences of King's Landing were bolstered. Blacksmiths worked day and night, reforging broken swords and patching armour. Maesters were instructed to begin gathering grain, water and herbs for what was surely to come. Ned summoned Robb to the capital, not to fight, but to understand. "The North will need more than a lord when winter falls," he told his son. "You must learn not just how to hold a sword, but how to hold a kingdom together." Robb came, but he came with a shadow. Some northern houses resented it. The Starks, they believed, had forgotten who they were. "The wolf belongs in the woods," Great John Umber grumbled, "not playing court games with southern snakes." But bigger shadows loomed. In the east, Daenerys Targaryen had not only married a Khal, she'd begun to transform him. Drogo no longer spoke only of raids and pillaging. His Khalasar, once content to roam the Dothraki Sea, now trained with strange discipline. They had ships, gold, advisors. They had vision. Whispers reached Ned that a silver-haired queen had named herself Stormborn and swore to cross the narrow sea. And she wasn't alone. A red woman travelled with her, a priestess who spoke of prophecy and fire, of waking dragons and burning kings. It was Varys who first brought the word to Ned, a look of rare concern on his powdered face. "The realm bleeds from within, my lord," he said softly, "but it may burn from without. She is no longer a child. She is something else." Ned frowned. "Then we'll face that threat when it comes." But the threats were already here. One morning the Tower of the Hand was filled with shouting. Joffrey Baratheon had vanished. His chambers were empty, his guards dead. No signs of struggle, no signs of escape. Just silence. A knife left on his bed, and a small golden lion figurine soaked in blood. Cersei screamed. She accused Ned of murder. She swore vengeance in the name of her son, though deep down, even she seemed unsure if he had been taken or silenced by her own enemies. Tywin, when told, said nothing at all. But the next day, his bannermen began to ride. The streets of King's Landing changed overnight. Fear, once kept behind closed doors, now roamed openly. People whispered of cursed kings and traitorous queens. Priests cried that the gods were punishing them all. Children disappeared in the night, taken for sacrifice by some or stolen by the desperate. Ned stood at the center of it all, silent and still, like a tree in the storm. But he was not unmoved. When Arya nearly vanished in the chaos, only to be found outside the Red Keep, with needle blooded and her face scratched, he realized how far the poison had spread. He held her that night and didn't speak a word. She clung to him like she did when she was small, and far beneath the city, in chambers where light had never touched, Tyrion Lannister met in secret with a cloaked woman who had no name but knew much. "Stark plays the game like a soldier," she said, "but this game needs a butcher." Tyrion raised a brow. "And who does the butchering?" The woman smiled. "Everyone. Soon enough, soon enough." The next wave of chaos didn't arrive with banners and horns. It came quietly, like a sickness spreading through the bones of the kingdom. Every corner of King's Landing whispered a different truth. Some said Joffrey had run off with a mistress and been killed by bandits. Others claimed he was taken by Stannis, held hostage as a bargaining chip. A few even believed Ned Stark had him executed to wipe out the last of Robert's line. The truth, as always, mattered little. Cersei locked herself inside the Red Keep, emerging only for brief, venomous appearances. Her fury was unmatched. She accused Ned of treason, called for his removal in the court, and demanded the crown passed to Tommen. But few stood with her. The Lannisters were losing their grip, and Tywin, still brooding in the west, sent no men, only silence. Still, Ned wasn't. Blind to the danger, he knew Cersei would not suffer quietly forever. He ordered the Queen to be placed under house arrest. It was the first time he'd truly acted like a king, and the court felt the shift. "You've made an enemy of a lioness," Renly warned. "Cornered beasts are the most dangerous." But Renly's own ambitions were growing. He began gathering support in the Reach, whispering promises to House Tyrell. "Westeros needs a young king," he'd say, smiling, "not one with a beard full of snow and regrets." In the north, the rumblings grew louder. Robb had returned to Winterfell, and the Karstarks and Boltons were already questioning their loyalty. "He should be ruling in the north, not sending ravens from the south," said Rose Bolton, voice low and measured. "Perhaps it's time the north ruled itself." And then Stannis struck. His fleet landed near Storm's End, burning the banners of the crown and raising his own. He moved fast, brutal, precise. Lord Selmy tried to reason with him, riding under a banner of truce. He was returned in pieces, sent back in a wooden box to mock the crown. Ned called for the lords to rally. Ravens flew to the Riverlands, the Vale, even Dorne. He summoned all who would honor peace to defend the realm, but peace was a word losing value fast. Then came the second blow, more terrible than the first. Sansa was kidnapped. One night, she simply vanished. Her guards found drugged. Her maid strangled. No blood, no trail, just a single token left on her bed, a mockingbird pin. Petter Baelish had been gone from court for weeks. Now Ned knew why. He held the pin in his hand for a long time. Catelyn broke. When she heard, her sobs echoed through the tower, and for the first time Ned looked lost. Not as a king, not as a lord, but as a father. He ordered every spy, every informant, every coin available to be spent on finding Sansa. But Peter was always 10 steps ahead. In the dungeons, Varys came quietly, offering words like medicine. "You are a good man," he said, "but Westeros does not reward goodness. It consumes it." Ned didn't answer. He stood in the war room that night alone, staring at the great painted table. Pieces moved across it like fate, Tyrells inching toward Renly, Martells silent and cold. The north, uncertain, Stannis closing in. The wolves were surrounded and winter was falling, and yet Ned still couldn't break who he was. He wouldn't assassinate Stannis in the night. He wouldn't frame Cersei for Joffrey's death. He wouldn't lie to the people to buy their love. He would rule with honor, even if it killed him. But across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen was making her move. She'd crossed the Red Waste. 3 dragons, small but growing, curled around her shoulders like fire come to life. Her Khalasar was now an army, not a horde. And the Red Woman stood at her side, whispering of the prince that was promised, a song of ice and fire. Westeros didn't know it yet, but the game was no longer about thrones or crowns. It was about survival. Snow began to fall in King's Landing. Not the thick, endless snow of Winterfell, but light flakes that drifted down like ash, settling on stone and steel. The people muttered that it was a bad omen. Snow in the south meant the old gods were watching and they were displeased. Ned stood on the balcony of the Tower of the Hand, watching it fall, thinking of Sansa, of the north, of Robert, and of the war that now surrounded him like wolves in a wood. Stannis had taken Storm's End. With grim precision, he'd executed every man who stood against him, naming them traitors to the realm. His letters now bore a new seal. Stannis Baratheon, King of the 7 Kingdoms, Lord of Light's Justice. The last part was the doing of the Red Priestess, Melisandre. Her influence was no longer a whisper, but a banner. Soldiers now, fought with her fire symbols stitched into their cloaks, and it wasn't just men they followed, it was miracles. Stannis' army had survived ambushes that should have slaughtered them. Fire arrows lit water. Men claimed to see visions in flame. One knight, executed by hanging, had walked again days later, his neck still bruised, but his eyes burning with faith. The lords of Westeros, once skeptical, were beginning to listen, not out of love for Stannis, but fear of whatever power followed him. Ned held a council, the room colder now than ever. Catelyn sat beside him, hollow-eyed from grief, her hands always clutching a worn, stark sigil cloth. The only thing she had left of Sansa. Renly was missing from the table. He was in the Reach, gathering swords with Loras Tyrell and whispering that Ned was growing weak. Varys and Tyrion remained, both guarded. Tyrion drank more now. He'd stopped joking. "I'm no priest, Stark," he said once, "but I know a losing hand when I see it." Still, Ned pressed on. He sent ravens to Dorne, offering freedom from southern taxes in exchange for troops. He pardoned minor lords to win their allegiance. He even allowed Arya to train with the City Watch to stop her from slipping away again. But every move felt like placing rocks against a rising tide. One night, Robb sent word from the north. The Boltons had betrayed them. Rose, always calm, had raised his banner in open rebellion, claiming the North should be free of southern wars. "Stark is no king," his message read. "He left the pack for a throne. Let him keep it, alone." And worse still, the Vale remained silent. Littlefinger had vanished with Sansa, and with him control of the Eyrie. Rumors spread he'd married Lysa Arryn in secret and was building his own army. But for what purpose, no one knew. Ned barely slept. Every raven carried disaster. Every door he opened seemed to lead to another betrayal. And then the worst one came. Jon Arryn's widow sent a sealed raven, addressed only to Ned, written in her maddening hand. The words shook him. "Sansa carries the child of a lion." He read it 5 times. The letter was short, cryptic, but the meaning was clear. Sansa was pregnant, and if the father was Lannister, then everything collapsed. The North would never accept it. The realm would turn its back. Even Catelyn, when told, went pale and cold. She didn't cry this time. She just sat in silence, staring out the window for hours. That night, Ned visited the crypt beneath the sept. He didn't speak, just stood before the statue of Robert Baratheon, still half-carved. Snow dusted its shoulders. Ned looked at his old friend and whispered, "We should have both died at the Trident." But death wasn't coming for him yet. It was coming for all of them, because across the sea, Daenerys had finally set sail. Her ships were dark wood and curved like talons. Dragons circled them in the sky. No longer babes, but beasts with eyes like molten gold. Her Khalasar had become a disciplined army of blended cultures, Dothraki screamers in armor, exiled knights, unsullied, drilled for blood. And behind her, fire rose in every city she conquered. Aboard her ship, the Red Woman lit a fire each night and whispered to the flames, "He is not the king. The North will fall. The wolf will kneel or burn." And Daenerys, storm-born and fire-fed, looked west and said only one word, "Dracarys, Dracarys." The docks of King's Landing were quiet the night Daenerys Targaryen arrived. No horns sounded, no armies clashed, no dragons screamed from the sky. Just a thick fog rolled in from Blackwater Bay, covering the harbour like a shroud. By the time the watchmen noticed the ships, they were already too close. Sleek vessels bearing no house sigil, only black sails and red banners with a burning heart. Ned was woken before dawn. Sir Barristan stood at the foot of his bed, armor already on, face pale. "They've landed. She's here." For a moment Ned said nothing. Then he rose, slow and stiff like a man far older than his years. He dressed without speaking, letting Catelyn help him with the leather straps of his armor. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were dry now. She'd run out of tears weeks ago. Ned rode down to the harbour with a dozen guards and half the city already awake, whispering. People lined the streets, not to cheer, but to watch. Fear was everywhere. The crown had grown heavy on his head. Even now, it felt more like a noose. At the docks, Daenerys waited. She stood calmly on the stone pier, wearing a long cloak of deep crimson, her silver hair flowing over her shoulders. 2 dragons coiled behind her, wings folded, eyes watching. Grey Worm and the Unsullied flanked her silently, and to her right stood Melisandre, cloaked in red, a smile dancing at the corner of her lips like a secret no one else was ready to hear. Ned dismounted. "You come without banners, without declaration." "Aye, and come as fire," Daenerys replied, "and fire announces itself." Her voice was calm, but her presence was not. She had grown into something else, not just queen, not just conqueror. She was a storm in human form, and the air felt charged, like lightning about to strike. "You've no claim to this land," Ned said. "Your house was cast down for madness and murder, and your house sits on a throne made of lies," she answered. "You wear the crown of a friend you let die. You rule a realm that wants no king. I come to break chains, not forge more of them." Melisandre stepped forward. "He is not Azor Ahai," she said, gazing at Ned like he was already ash. "He carries the cold of death, not the flame of rebirth. Let the true light guide us." One of the dragons lifted its head, growling low. The guards tensed. Swords were half drawn. Barristan looked at Ned, waiting for a word, but Ned didn't speak. Instead, he turned to Daenerys. "You want the Iron Throne?" "I want justice," she said. "Then earn it," he answered, "not with fire, with mercy." Daenerys didn't respond right away. She stared at him, long and searching, as if peeling away the layers of the man. Standing before her, finally she nodded once. "Then I'll give you one day." And she turned, cloak trailing behind her, dragons slinking after her like shadows. The dock emptied behind her. No one dared stop her. That day passed like an hourglass bleeding too fast. Ned summoned his council. Tyrion argued for assassination. "Burn the ships, poison the woman, fight fire with fire." Varys warned against it. "You'll lose the city. The people fear her, but they will worship her if she burns your tower and leaves the rest untouched." Catelyn urged him to negotiate. "You know what this throne has done to you. You see what it's cost us. Let it go, Ned. Let her have it. We'll return to Winterfell." But Ned couldn't. He thought of the North, of his bannermen, of his daughter still held by Littlefinger, of the thousands of lives bound to this choice. "I took this crown to keep peace," he said. "If I abandon it now, I lose more than honor. I lose every man who followed me." Night came. The sky went red with the setting sun, and from the tallest tower in the Red Keep, the dragons screamed. The bells began to ring just after midnight. Not for celebration, not for surrender, but for warning. The kind of bells that rattled bones and told you the city was about to bleed. From the windows of the Red Keep, Ned could already see the sky glowing orange. Fire crawled along the rooftops of the harbour district, and screams echoed up the hill like a rising tide. The small folk had begun to panic. Some ran toward the flames, hoping to escape by ship. Others ran toward the keep, begging for protection. Most just ran, with nothing but fear in their eyes. "She's burning the city," Tyrion hissed, barging into the war room, half drunk, face flushed. "So much for your talks of mercy." "No," Varys said quietly, eyes wide. "She's not burning the city. She's burning the Lannister holdouts. Look, only the lion banners are aflame." It was true. Wherever the golden lion flew, fire. It followed. Daenerys had sent her dragons not to destroy the capital, but to dismantle its old power. She knew where the Lannister strongholds were. She knew which gates they'd bribed, which warehouses they controlled, which noble homes they'd fortified. Fire rained on them with frightening precision. "She's already inside our walls," Sir Barristan muttered. Ned stood frozen for a moment, then he moved. He called the city watch to him, gave orders fast and clear. Protect the small folk, secure the gates, do not engage with the unsullied. He wanted no blood spilled unless it was absolutely necessary. He wasn't going to fight a war inside his own city, but war didn't wait for permission. By dawn, the unsullied had reached the Red Keep. Ned stood in full armor at the gates, flanked by Sir Barristan and Catelyn, who had refused to leave. Arya stood behind them, a sword at her hip. Too young, too angry. Ned had told her to stay inside. She didn't listen. She never had. Daenerys arrived on foot, her army behind her like a wave that had paused, ready to crash. The dragons circled above, screeching like thunder. The people of King's Landing watched from alleys, windows and rooftops, some terrified, others entranced. For the first time in years, they saw a queen who did not beg or lie. Is this how it ends? Catelyn whispered. In fire. No, Ned said. It ends how we choose. He stepped forward. The guards parted. The city held its breath. He looked Daenerys in the eye. You burned those who defied you. I burned those who ruled with blood and coin. I left the people untouched. Ned nodded. Then you understand. This city is no longer mine. The realm is yours, if you still want it. Whispers spread like wildfire. The king was surrendering, but Daenerys didn't smile. And what of you, Lord Stark? What becomes of kings who give up their crowns? I was never meant to wear it, he said. It was a burden, not a gift. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she extended her hand. Then kneel, Lord Stark. Let the realm see you choose peace over pride. The silence was deep as the crypts beneath Winterfell, and then Ned, the most stubborn man in the realm, the man whose honor nearly destroyed him, knelt. Cheers broke out across the square. The people cried with joy or relief or simply exhaustion. The crown fell from Ned's head and rolled across the stones. Arya stared at her father, stunned. Catelyn reached for his hand, holding it tight. And in that moment, a new queen was born, not by fire, but by mercy. But peace is fragile. And far to the east, word of Daenerys' rise reached Stannis Baratheon, who saw fire as his weapon alone. She steals the Lord's flame, he said, tossing the raven into the fire. Then she must be cleansed by it. And in the north, Roose Bolton smiled as he read the message sent from Littlefinger. The wolf has bowed, the pack is scattered, winter is ours, is ours. The snow didn't stop after Daenerys took the throne. It fell harder now, as if the North itself mourned what had happened to the Stark legacy. Some whispered Ned Stark had bowed to save the realm, others said he'd broken under the weight of the crown. But in the cold halls of Winterfell, the truth didn't matter. What mattered was that the wolf had knelt, and wolves weren't meant to kneel. Robb had called his bannermen. The Karstarks came with fury. The Umbers brought steel. Even the Glovers and Manderleys, long reluctant, answered the call. But it wasn't a war against Daenerys they were preparing for. No, Robb Stark had a deeper enemy in mind. House Bolton. Rose had declared himself Warden of the North, claiming Ned's surrender proved the Starks had no spine. He'd forged alliances with lingering Frey loyalists, old clans driven by revenge, and dark sellswords from the east. In the shadows of the Dreadfort, the bastard of Bolton, Ramsay, sharpened knives and trained dogs, already dreaming of skinning a king. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, things were fragile. Daenerys ruled, but not like Robert or the Targaryens before him. She walked the streets daily without guards. She freed debtors, punished corrupt merchants, and offered coin to starving mothers. The people adored her, but the lords did not. They feared her dragons more than they respected her crown. Ned had taken a place beside her, not as hand, not as a lord, but as a voice, quiet, honest. She trusted him, though neither of them said it out loud. He'd warned her of fire, of madness, of what her father had done. She'd listened, at least for now. Arya disappeared one night, no goodbyes, no letters, just gone. Varys claimed she'd boarded a ship heading west under a false name. Some wolves, he said, don't belong in cages, even golden ones. Catelyn stayed in the capital, but her heart never left Winterfell. Each day she wrote to Robb. Each night she wept for Sansa, still missing, still a ghost held by a man no one could find. And then, just as things started to steady, Stannis attacked Dragonstone. His fleet, baptized in fire and guided by the Lord of Light, smashed Daenerys's outposts to splinters. His soldiers carved through her defenders with cold, holy fury. Melisandre called it a sign. The false queen has no light in her, only shadow. Her dragons are abominations. He raised his banners again, this time not in defiance of Ned Stark, but against Daenerys Targaryen. War brewed once more. Daenerys held counsel with Ned. She wanted to strike first, burn his ships, march south with her dragons. But Ned shook his head. If you burn every man who opposes you, you'll rule over ashes. And if I don't, I'll die on a pile of broken promises, she snapped. But still, she waited, listened. That was her strength, and her curse. But all peace has limits. One night, a raven arrived from the Vale. Sansa had been found. Petyr Baelish was dead, throat slit in his sleep. Sansa had escaped with a few guards, making her way to the Riverlands. She was with Lady Brienne now, slowly travelling toward Winterfell. Ned read the letter a dozen times. For the first time in months, he smiled. But before joy could settle, another. Raven came. Winterfell was under siege. Roose Bolton had struck fast. Ramsay led the assault. Fires raged through the outer walls. Bodies hung from trees. Robb was holding barely, but the letter was clear. Come home, or there will be no home left. Ned rose. His sword, long kept sheathed, was strapped across his back once more. I ride for Winterfell, he told Daenerys. You'll start a civil war. I'm ending one. She didn't stop him. She didn't offer dragons. Just a quiet nod. Maybe she knew. Maybe she saw in him the one man who never wanted a crown, but carried more honor than any king before or after. And so he rode, back through the snow, back through the forests of his youth, back to where this all began. The battle for Winterfell was blood and ice. Robb held the walls. The Karstarks fought like madmen. Ramsay sent dogs ahead of his men, a nightmare unleashed. But then the horns blew, and the gates opened, and Eddard Stark returned. His sword sang like steel meeting justice. Beside him rode old northern houses that had once been quiet, now roaring. It wasn't Daenerys's army, it wasn't dragons, it was the North rising to reclaim itself. Rose tried to flee. He was caught and dragged before Ned. Ramsay vanished. Some say he died in the snow, others say he became one of his beasts. The battle ended with Winterfell in flames, but still standing. Ned walked its halls that night, fingers tracing stone. And memory. He knelt beside the heart tree, bloodied and tired, and whispered names. Bran, Rickon, Sansa. Then he rose. Back in King's Landing, Daenerys ruled, a just queen, but not a beloved one. She had dragons, she had power, but without Ned Stark, she had no balance. The lords began to conspire. The small folk prayed she would hold. Time would tell, but in the north, they crowned Robb Stark King of Winter. And Ned, he returned to being what he always was, the quiet strength behind the storm, a man who had once worn a crown and gave it up for the world. A king who knelt to save everyone else from burning.